Micro students, how are you today? All right, so far, I know a few of you have struggled, but for the most part, I have homework trickling in from chapters 1 through 5, chapter 7, consumers and producers, and this week we are going to be working on chapters 8 and 11. If you still have outstanding homework, if you are having any issues with homework, if you need some one-on-one instructional time, please let me know. I am available Tuesday and Thursday before Tuesday and Thursday anywhere from 1 to 2:30 at West Campus or by appointment. We are in the last 3 weeks of class, so I want to make sure that you are caught up and ready for the final and ready for the project. Um, so if you are struggling sooner rather than later, please reach out to me so we can make an appointment. I've taught micro years and years and years, and I realize it's not necessarily the perfect format to have it asynchronous online. It's a little bit more question and answer. I am trying to post some coordinating videos other than just my own instructional videos. But the students that I have met with, I've met with a number of students. We have gotten a lot accomplished in a short period of time. So remember, just don't overthink any of the concepts too much. And if you're having issues, you can reach out via text. You can even send me a short video if you have specific issues. And in the homework, if there are problems, there are a couple problems in each homework assignment that are really tricky, right? They're for kind of to challenge you. So if you're getting through the homework and most of it seems pretty easy and you get to a problem that seems like really difficult, either reach out to me or, when you send me your homework, put a note in there. I couldn't finish problem 7. And so then I know that and I can look at it and I can then move forward from there. Now, a couple things before we get into chapter 8, under the course specific items, right? In there are the adjustments to the syllabus. The project is also posted under course specific, and the solutions are in there, first folder. I have all the solutions uploaded now through chapter 11, actually. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, and 11 are all posted. So if you are working on 8 and 11, and I'm thinking moving forward, I will probably post solutions partway through the week or at the very end of each week so that you have those to look at. Make sure that you go back through and you are double checking your homework so that it matches up to the solutions. Without me sitting there and drawing the solutions for you, this is the next best thing, that the solutions are there for you to kind of self-check your work on those homework assignments as you try them. So go through those. If you're having difficulty finding any of those things under the course specifics folder, it's above the weekly folder, let me know, right? The project is in there as well. Make sure that you are looking at a company. The discussion for the rest of the term will be, if you're participating at all in the discussion, that is great. It's more for question and answer, peer-to-peer tutoring. And the 1 through 5 discussion seems like the students that had, for whatever reason, an understanding of the concepts and the problems were easily able to post solutions and answers to students that were struggling with those same questions. And so the next chapter might be different, right? We are through most of the quantitative items, if that helps. So we are going to be looking at chapter 8 this week. And if you open up your PowerPoint, there are 20 PowerPoint slides. This is relating to taxation. Now, if you struggled with consumers and producers, and really the consumers and the producers being the prequel for the entire supply and demand curve and the idea behind supply and demand, you may struggle a little with this taxation issue. So what we're looking at, we're taking that consumer surplus and producer surplus and moving forward to the next item. So most of you know what a tax is, and really what a tax is, it creates an issue within the marketplace, right? So we're going to lay this idea of a tax into that graph where we have consumers and producers graphed with the demand curve and a supply curve. And so what it does is it's a third item added in that creates a problem. It drives a wedge between the price buyers pay and the price sellers receive. Remember, because a tax will either raise the price, right? So it's a burden on both parties when it comes to supply and demand. All right, so if you look at slide 2 there, the effects of a tax, we'll look at that shows a supply and a demand curve and a tax of $7, or just a tax, right? So we see the equilibrium, P The P sub E is the equilibrium price, and that is where supply and demand intersect, right, at equilibrium. And when we change the price, right, we also then, if we look at, if our red line represents the size of a tax, right, so it's the new price buyers pay and the new price sellers receive, then that changes where we hit on the supply curve and demand curve, right? It's no longer at equilibrium. It's at a different spot on those curves. And according to the slide that you're looking at, it will be at the quantity relative to taxation, Q sub T. So in the next slide, we see the revenue. This is what the government looks at, or government entity. They look at this idea of revenue from tax. And the revenue from tax is really the area of that entire rectangle, right? The entire pink area there. So if we had numbers on this graph, we could actually calculate by using length times width, the formula for area, what the area of that taxation, what that amount is, right? That quantitative number. All right, so the effects of a tax, well, what happens is that it reduces both consumer surplus and producer surplus, right? And we're going to look at how that works relative to how much it reduces them. But tax revenue does help with many services, education, road, police, things like that. Now, the effects of tax. These are the important slides coming up. So we can look at, you know what it looks like. We're using areas, again, to calculate underneath the curve. Like we calculated consumer and producer surplus, right? From the last chapter, or from chapter 7, last chapter. Now, when you look at this slide, the effects, slide 7, effects of tax, we first look at what the consumer surplus and producer surplus would be without tax, right? And so without a tax, it would be the entire area from the equilibrium price line all the way to the equilibrium price quantity, where that is. That whole triangle above that line is the consumer surplus, and the whole triangle below that line is the producer surplus. And so it would be all of those letters, A, B, and C, right? But each of these letters actually have meaning as we move forward. So this chapter is about the meaning of those different letters when we add tax in. And so our total surplus would actually be all of those letters, A, B, C, D, E, and F, right? Adding all of those numbers together. Because remember, if we add numbers to this graph, what happens is that we can calculate area by using triangles, adding up the area of each triangle, adding up the area of the rectangles, and figuring out tax revenue from that perspective. All right, so effects of tax. When we look at the next slide, slide 8, page 8, what we see is that if we add that tax in from the previous slide, that rectangle, which is technically B and D, right, we now see that the consumer surplus is a small triangle, just letter A, and the producer surplus is a small triangle, just letter F. And then we see C and E out in front, colored in a dark yellow color, and that is a whole other issue, right? So now we have the B and D together is the tax revenue. The A and B is this is all part of what we consider total surplus, A and B, D and F. But C and E are a whole other issue. The tax reduces the total surplus by this specific amount. And this specific amount is called a deadweight loss. And this is the reason for this thing called a deadweight loss. This is the fall in the total surplus. So this is no longer on the table, right there. And this is ceased to exist. This whole area that is considered area C and area E. It ceases to exist when taxation is added in. And this results from a market distortion, such as a tax. Okay, so that new area, but again, all of this can be calculated if we layer on, this is theoretical and model-wise, but we can layer on numbers and then we can get actual numbers if we are depicting an actual marketplace. But this is still just theory and a model. Because of the tax units between the quantity sub T and quantity sub E that are within that triangle are lost. They're not sold, right? Because remember, the price that buyers pay is now higher. So when we have a higher price, we lose some buyers. Remember from consumer surplus, we raise the price, some people bow out, right? Some of the buyers bow out. And when we reduce the price that sellers receive, right, the new quantity relating to the price that sellers receive, the Q sub T, guess what happens? When there's less money received, there are sellers that will back out of the marketplace. And so that triangle tells us something called dead weight loss. And so the issue is the tax, this is the key issue from this chapter, prevents some mutual beneficial trades that would have happened in a marketplace had there been no tax. So it hurts not only buyers, but it also hurts sellers. And so it hurts the entire market. This is no longer an unfettered market. This market has a distortion on it called tax, because people that could otherwise participate in the market, folks that are either buyers or sellers, are unable to because of the change in price, the reduced price that sellers receive and the increased price that buyers pay. So we see a couple examples here, first with an airline, and then we see the different areas. So take a look at those and try those out. And then we see what determines the size of the dead weight loss. Because if the government is smart, they will tax industries, or they will tax marketplaces that provide with the smallest dead weight loss and the largest revenue, right? They want to try to if the government is smart, they will try to have the smallest dead weight loss, because that means they're interfering with the market in the least possible way. And so this now relates to chapter 5, all of your favorite chapters, right? On elasticity. So when we have supply that's inelastic, remember it's a steep slope, so it's almost straight up and down versus flat. That's flat slope, steep slope. When we have a steep slope for supply, and we are on page 15, or when supply is inelastic, it's harder for firms to leave the market when the tax reduces the price for suppliers. So it has little effect. So the dead weight loss is small. Look at the area of the yellow triangle. Look at it now. If it's more elastic, so our supply curve has flattened out, right? Look at the size of the area just in viewing how much bigger the area is of the triangle now in slide 16. It's bigger, right? And so that's the dead weight loss. We want to try to prevent a large dead weight loss. The same with demand. Dead weight loss. When demand is inelastic, it's harder for consumers to leave the market, meaning that they don't react to price changes, right? Very much. They're insensitive to price changes, or it's inelastic, right? And versus the next slide, which shows a more elastic demand. When there's an elastic demand, any changes in price drastically affect how buyers react. And so the theory is that inelasticity is better. If we could have inelastic supply in a marketplace, that's a good marketplace to tax, or inelastic demand. If we can find both inelastic supply and inelastic demand in a marketplace, that would be the very best marketplace to tax. So there's a couple examples here for you to try. Would the dead weight loss of a tax be larger if the tax were on breakfast cereal or sunscreen? And go ahead and answer that one. And then that is the last slide for chapter 8, talking about dead weight loss. So that concludes chapter 8, instructional video. I will post another video talking about dead weight loss, YouTube video for you in addition to my video. And then next we will do chapter 11.